Licensing Commission. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Pursuant to the provisions of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, notice is hereby given that if you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the entry of the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission's decision. We advise that you seek your own independent legal advice to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met. Fellow commissioners, I believe Mr. Fields has circulated last month's minutes for approval. Do I have a motion with regard to those minutes?
I'll move for approval of the minutes.
I'll second.
Motion has been seconded. All those in favor of approving last month's minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes are approved. First on the agenda, ladies and gentlemen, we have a public hearing for consideration of a Transportation Licensing Commission rule regarding taxicab liability insurance requirements, uninsured motorist insurance coverage, and insurance company rating requirements. We've got several requests to speak. Let me make sure they all govern this particular hearing. All right. I'll ask that Mr. Bruce Giles come forward. Hello.
I'm Bruce Giles, Vice President of Underwriting and Product Development with Atlas Financial. We write insurance in Tennessee using American Service Insurance Company. We've been writing here for several months. We actually entered the market when one of your constituents, Checker Cab Company, had a need for a carrier that was willing to provide additional limits of liability beyond what the current carriers within the market were willing to provide, which was a limit of $300,000. We currently ride cabs across the country, have a lot of experience doing it. We're focused on public automobile business, actually entered the insurance industry over 85 years ago, providing coverage for cabs in the city of Chicago. Last time when I was here a month ago, I passed out some information just so the committee would understand the difference between an admitted and not admitted carrier and what that really means for the protection of the public, in that the state insurance plan will respond if there is a financial problem with an admitted carrier. As you go across the country and you look from city to city, most of the major metropolitan cities simply require admitted carriers. They don't even make a distinction whether it's A, B, C, even D rated or unrated, actually, with AM Best in some cases. They're simply looking for an admitted carrier. Examples of those cities would be New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Dallas. New Orleans also doesn't require an AM Best rating of the carriers. Well, an AM Best rating, and obviously, the higher the rating, it does have to do with the financial wherewithal of the company. There are many other factors that go into the rating with AM Best. In our case, it was a situation where we spun off from a different parent company, and there's some legacy issues that they're still wondering about in regard to that. That's why we currently have a B rating, even though on their financial scoring model, which is called the B car score, we would actually generate an A. I don't blame them for the fact that we've got a B today. It's kind of like Missouri. They want us to show them that we can show, profitability over a sustained amount of time to get a higher rating. But again, I do want to just re-emphasize to you that If you pass a rule that it's an admitted carrier, whether it's B, C, or whatever, and that would be up to you, what you would want to decide. But you do need to make that distinction between, I think, admitted and non-admitted carriers and the additional protection that is provided to your public by your state insurance plan by the fact that it's an admitted carrier. Do you have any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Nathan Spears.
I'll give you guys some info if I can approach. Great. Well, we already ruled on this 2 months ago, but we're having the discussion yet again. It is important. Ratings do matter. I guess I'd like to start with a question. I don't know if I'd be curious to know what Metro Legal or what the city, if there's a requirement in that regard for carrier ratings.
It depends on the context a little bit.
Generally,
In our purchasing contracts, I believe the minimum insurance requirements do generally involve AM Best rating of A-.
okay, thank you. Well, as it stands right now, obviously, we don't have a rating requirement for taxi cabs. We do for limousines, but not for taxis. AM Best, more or less, breaks the ratings down into 2 categories, and you're looking at them: secure or vulnerable. The gentleman who just spoke, I concur with what he said. There are oftentimes plausible reasons that you would not have a superior rating or excellent rating. For the past 10 years at least, maybe more, this market has involved carriers that are rated B++ or better. Companies earn those ratings. They sign up voluntarily to be rated. He also referred to Checker Cab having a need for higher limits. Well, they saw this coming down the pike, so they wanted to be preemptive about it. And I don't know if a company representative from Checker is here or not, but some of their owners are, and they will certainly remember that I was contacted and instructed to find a carrier that would provide those limits, and they wanted a rating of A- or better. At the time, I insured 70-something Checker cabs. I lost them all but 2, 15% of my income. Why? Because they did an about-face and decided that a B-rated carrier would be fine. It's cheaper. Something that I've tried to teach my insureds for many years is that cheaper is not better, it's just cheaper. So at any rate, I think you can pretty clearly see where I stand on the issue of ratings. Right now I have 5 carriers, all admitted, all B++ or better. What's the difference there? I'm going to refer to something from AM Best in 2008. You don't have it in front of you. Well, actually, no, you do. Good job. Okay. Second page, just to put it in perspective. A couple months ago, the commission was rather confused as to what the difference is in the first place. Companies that are rated B or B- have a 1 in 48 chance or expectancy of becoming insolvent, 34.8 times more likely to fail than those rated A+ or A++. Conversely, B++ rated companies have a 1 in 133 likelihood to become insolvent. 3 to 3.5 times more secure, if you will. On a personal note, I feel that I was unfairly undercut, and I've been rather patient with the issue and very polite about it, I believe, and I'm tired of it. So at any rate, I would support a B++ rating or better, which is considered secure by AM Best versus vulnerable. I have no personal issue with this carrier, with their agents. They certainly had no problem taking my business. They marched into town. They can march out as far as I'm concerned. As far as the limits themselves are concerned, I believe we ruled on a 150 limit. I feel it's adequate. Commissioner McNally asked me in the last some odd years how many claims maxed out the current limits. The primary carrier that I represent, Consumers Insurance, B++ rated, Tennessee company, domiciled in Murfreesboro. They had a total of 6 claims that maxed out. That is statewide. It also includes Alabama. So those would not all be Nashville-related claims. Apart from that, I don't really have anything else to add, except maybe in regards to uninsured motorists. There's pie in the sky, and then there's reality. Right now, taxi cabs are not required to carry at all. I don't know if you legally can require them to carry it, but I won't issue any policy without it, and that's been my position for many years now. So the statutory minimums for coverage is practical. If you want to go higher, that's fine, but they'll just have to pay more for it. So that's something that should be considered. So if you haven't...
When you say uninsured motorists, you're saying the minimum 25?
Yes,
Is that
sir.
where you stand?
Yes, sir.
You also mentioned that 6 claims were maxed out.
Yeah.
How do we know that the claims, let's say the max was 100, the claim wasn't 300, but it got maxed out at 100?
I'm sorry?
You said 6 claims were maxed out. Meaning,
Yes, sir.
Let's say they had 50, 100.
Okay.
At 100 were maxed out. But let's say the insurance or the medical expenses were at 200.
Sure.
How many of those, do we have any information on that?
In other words, on the claims that did max out,
Right.
how did it affect the individual who was injured, the injured party?
Exactly.
I don't have that information in front of me, but I'd be happy to share it with you.
Great.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Spears.
Sal?
Jamie Hobgood. Hello.
Jamie Hopgood from Consumers Insurance. I'm the territory manager for Consumers, and I did not come to debate the B++ rating. That is our rating currently. We've worked very hard for that rating. I really just wanted to represent our company. We were started in Tennessee by a group of insurance agents that decided to have a home-based company here. We're based in Murfreesboro. We've been riding taxis since 2003. And we have been offering the 5,100 limit for quite some time. Very few have taken it just because of the price increase. So that is something, obviously, that Nathan mentioned. But really, I just wanted to introduce myself as a representative of our company. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Mr. Hopgood. There's one other person who's requested to speak. I'm not sure if it's on this particular item on the agenda. David McIndoe? Sorry, I couldn't read your handwriting.
That's all right. I did it real quick. Hi, my name is Dave McIndoe. I represent Greater Nashville Insurance, and we sell taxi insurance, have been since 1988. We represent Hollers Insurance, which is domiciled in Tennessee, represent Consumers, which is domiciled in Tennessee. I emailed you, and you probably have my notes from the email that I sent Billy to give you. But as Nathan stated a while ago, the company's AM Best, there is no foolproof. Anybody can go under. That's a given. But with the A++ or A+ rating, 1 out of every 1,500 companies, 1,600 companies go out of business. So they've got a proven track record since 1893 of doing this, so they can speak terms. I represent a rated company, which is one out of 500 companies. If I were to, my E&O insurance with consumers, I'm required to carry $1 million E&O insurance for my company, Greater Nashville Insurance. If we misquote something, let's say you have a dwelling property that you now have switched to a commercial property, and you call me and tell me to make that change. Well, if I took it off your dwelling but didn't add it to your commercial and it burnt down, my E&O is going to pay for that building to be replaced, or however you want the money, upfront, however. For me to represent a B-rated company, you have to jump through hoops. If it goes insolvent, my E&O does not back it up. So if it goes insolvent and the state funds are run out and my customer's looking for me for money, my E&O does not cover it. Where my E&O would cover it from B++ or higher. But B-rated company, I'm kind of left in limbo with Westport on my E&O insurance. And that's a risk personally I don't want to take for my staff, my business, and the small business that we are. We can't afford to take any chances like that. That's why I won't represent a B-rated company, period. It's not worth the risk.
What about a B+ rated company?
You have to, on B+, you have to give financial statements every year to your E&O, and it's not really not worth it either. We wouldn't make business is going out and selling new business. I don't have time to get their year-end statements to see if it's, when there's other carriers like that. If you go down to Exhibit Exhibit E, we're acting like, everybody comes up and acts like there's no insurance companies out there that's going to cover this. 72% of insurance companies have A- or better rating. So it's not like there's not insurance companies out there that's going to write this. 72% have A- or rating better. And if you go to B+, you can add another 17% on that. So that's at 89%. So if you go B++ and above, 89% of all companies gone through AM Best are there. So it's not really, is there enough companies out to write this? They're out there. We might have to work harder to get them. We might have to meet some new people in order to get them, but they're out there. Like I said, 89% are B++ and better with AM Best. So does that answer your question about B+? It's, I have to get their year-end statements. I have to provide it to my E&O carrier, which is Westport, and get it approved, and then go in order to sell it. It's not worth the hassle to me. I've got other things to do that. On the approach, this is from the Metropolitan Airport Authority. There's two different forms here. I'm asking at you. One is the first one handed to you is green transportation policy. The next one is an audit that was done. An outside independent audit did for the Airport Transportation Authority. And we'll back up 1 second to the, if you go back to the first one passed out to you, the commercial transportation policy. On Appendix E, it talks about their requirements for taxi and limousines. And on number 2, it talks about the $1.5 million. Well, that's for the limousine. If you get to the last highlighted paragraph, it says, or other government agencies having regulatory authority over operations of the operator. In other words, you have the right. Whatever you say on limits is what they're going to adjust to. And that's an awesome responsibility. Not only are you over now the city of Nashville, but you're over the airport as well. Your ruling is going to be over the airport as well. And then go down to number 4, last sentence in the paragraph, it says the insurance company must be rated as very good or better in the latest edition of Key & Best and licensed to do business in the state of Tennessee. It doesn't say the company must be vulnerable good or anything else. It says very good. Now, if you go on to the audit, the last one I presented you, and turn to the second page, on the second paragraph, it's highlighted. these are things that they need to improve doing. They're not verifying this. But it says that the term minimum requirement means AM rating of A minus based upon a criteria of financial strength and financial size rating, utility AM best. So the outside auditing company says, hey, airport, you need to follow by your own guidelines. Here's A minus. And we know we've been Holler's been A minus since 1987. And it wasn't until early 2000 that it was ever an issue, and the B plus came into effect. Questions?
I have one question.
Sure.
You mentioned E&O coverage for B++ company or above.
That's fine.
B plus is fine too
B
for E&O?
B plus is fine.
Yeah.
I don't have to do anything. I don't have to jump
I'm
in.
not worried about what you got to do, but is E&O coverage still available for a B+ company?
If it is coverage, if you want to go through the answer question, yes.
All right, that's all
If you
I
want to
need.
go through the hoops, yes.
Thank you.
You said something about if you didn't use a B+ company, maybe I've heard you wrong, that the state insurance fund would not cover. Could you,
No, B rated.
a B rated?
If I used a B rated company and that company failed and it has 1 out of 48% chances of failure, and the state funds are used up, and I sold your insurance to you, you'd be coming for me for the money. My E&O would not pay you. For the example that I gave, if she went to a dwelling, to a resident, to a commercial, my E&O would pay for that. But if it was a B-rated company and the state funds were used up, there was
The state funds were used.
stuff,
Okay.
and that we don't know how much. I think the limit's $100,000. So it is what it is there too.
Thank you, Mr. McAdoo. Mr. Fields, can you recite what the previous ruling of the commission was with regard to insurance liability limits from 2 months ago?
Yeah, the rule that you passed that would go into effect on May 31st, 2013 would be a 50, 100, 50. And then the following June, it would, following May, it would go to 100, 300, back to 50 with a insurance coverage, the rating of the insurance company being a B+.
And the B plus was to take effect at the
Again.
end of this month.
Yes.
Did we set an uninsured motorist minimum at that time? We did not.
We did not. It was not noticed, so we were able to, that's the reason we brought these issues back to you. We will also probably need to revisit the deadline date for having the insurance in place because of the change.
And I see Mr. Cobb is here, present with us today. Do you mind answering some questions for the commission? If you could please introduce yourself for the recording.
Okay, I'm B.C. Cobb with the Legal Department Insurance Division.
Thank you. I had a question for you, Mr. Cobb. And, at last month's meeting, there were several statements made about the Tennessee's insurance plan, which would presumably apply in the event that an insurer went under and had several claims pending with existing policyholders. Can you please tell us a little bit about that plan and how it works?
I think you're referring to the Tennessee Guarantee Fund, and it does, like the gentleman stated earlier, has a $100,000 limit. And what I was told by the administrator there is that limit is a combined limit, meaning it covers everything for the entire accident of $100,000. So in doing that, if that's true, in doing that, then you could actually limit yourself based on what the limits are going to go up to next year.
And there have been statements about accredited insurance companies and non-accredited. Is that correct, that only
Admitted.
accredited insurance companies would be covered under the state guarantee plan?
I think you're referring to admitted.
Admitted,
companies.
excuse
And-
me.
Yeah, and if they're admitted, yeah, those are the only ones that would be covered. Yes, sir.
Would it be wise for us to add that verbiage in to only have admitted carriers? Do you foresee that being an issue?
I wouldn't. I would think that the best idea would be for us to just keep the AM Best rating. I think that most of the companies that are rated where we need them to be, they're very likely to be admitted.
So if we did B, I guess it's B plus or better, they're usually or most likely accredited. Or
Admitted,
I'm
yes, sir.
sorry.
Mhm.
Would there be any harm if we had the word admitted in there? Just to make sure that a B-plus company is admitted in Tennessee?
I don't think you'd have any harm, no. Not as long as you, I mean, I don't think you have any harm if you don't use the word only, only admitted companies. I think you need to include the AM Best rating as well.
What's your recommendation for an AM Best rating for taxi cabs?
Well,
Insurance?
initially, I think last month, or 2 months ago, I think I mentioned that A-, but I think we agreed at B+.
After everything you've heard today, what do you think?
I would be acceptable for B+.
Thank you, sir.
On coverage, what are your thoughts? What do you think is a good number that's fair, that will provide for public safety?
Well, a good number is whatever we're carrying on the, whatever the requirement is for the liability. But I think that, you know, in adding coverage, you're essentially protecting folks in the taxi for the negligence of other parties that may not have anything to do with the taxi driver.
I have a question about the coverage and how it operates. If, and I'll give you a hypothetical, if a taxi cab has passengers in it and is involved in an accident and the other driver of the other vehicle is at fault, does the taxi cab's liability insurance coverage protect the passengers of that cab even though the other driver was at fault?
No.
Okay.
So coverage would be a big deal.
It would be a big deal in that instance. Everybody, you know, if an uninsured motorist hits you, I mean, no matter where you are, no matter what you're in, you're still going to be vulnerable to it. You have to have some sort of coverage, you know, on your personal vehicle or health insurance or something that's going to cover it outside of that. I mean, but, you know, you're putting that responsibility on the taxi driver to carry that. And essentially what you're doing is just saying the taxi driver must protect everybody in this taxi, no matter who caused the accident, no matter what happens. So, I mean, you know, it's, you know, you guys' decision in terms of that's what you want to do, but that's essentially what's happening if you do that.
And is there a difference between uninsured motorists and underinsured motorists? Is that a separate level of coverage?
It's a separate coverage. Underinsured would kick in if you have a specific limit on your policy, and then let's say the injuries, let's say you have medical bills of $50,000 and your limits are $25,000. Well, obviously you can't pay the $50,000, so your underinsured motorist coverage will kick in then.
I'd like to go back a second. I have some documents in front of me. It says the limo, motor coach, and shuttle companies are required to have A- or better on the AM Best. And then also today received this Metropolitan Nashville Airport Authority saying A-, or I guess it was referred to as A-. Do we have any idea how A- was chosen for those particular minimum requirements?
I don't know who developed those requirements, but I mean, like I said, most of the metro contracts require that as well.
A-.
A-, that's right.
Thanks, Mr. Cobb.
Thank you, Mr. Cobb. Before we close the public hearing portion of this item on the agenda, are there any other persons who would like to speak on this issue?
I'd like to rebut some of the stuff that was mentioned, if I could.
And you're Mr. Giles?
Mr. Giles, yes.
Mr. Giles.
E&O was brought into this conversation, and agents being able to purchase E&O coverage. Currently, we have 244 agents that represent us across the country, and our contract with those agents requires that they carry E&O coverage. I have copies of the deck pages for E&O coverage on every single one of those agents that represent us. In addition, the gentleman mentioned that there were percentages of companies that, you know, with A-, et cetera, and that there's plenty of companies out there willing to provide coverage on taxis. In reality, there are very few companies across this country that are willing to cover taxi cabs. I would hazard to say that probably less than 5% of the companies that write insurance across this country, property and casualty coverage, which is where commercial auto falls in, would be willing to write a taxi cab. For most insurance carriers, that is very high on their list of we will not write, because taxi cabs have accidents. Again, you know, we're a company that is focused on taxis, limos, paratransit vehicles, public also. We understand that. We understand they're going to have claims. We understand we're going to need to pay those claims, that we're going to need to protect the public. I would ask, maybe some of the other gentlemen here from haulers and consumers in regards to Checker currently has a $300,000 limit of liability. They are going above and beyond what you're even requesting of the other cab companies today. How we entered this market was that we were a company willing to provide $300,000 limit of liability to the public because Checker thought that that would be adequate coverage or better coverage at any rate for the public in case one of their cabs got into an accident. I would ask, do these other carriers, are they willing to step up and provide those kind of limits? Because I know initially they were not. That's how we entered this market. In addition, in regard to Mr. Spears, he applied for a contract with our company. He's here saying today that he wouldn't want to do business with a company that wasn't B++ or better. But I'm here to tell you, he applied for a contract with our company. We decided not to do business with him. It had nothing to do with his expertise or anything. It's a situation where we tend to limit the partners that we do business with in a given area. We were already doing business with King Associates, had a good partnership with them, so we didn't think we needed additional representation here. But I just wanted to kind of clear the record on some of those statements, that there is E&O available, and that, while some people say, it would never represent B++ or better or whatever, in reality they would if they could, maintain the coverage. And that we are providing additional limits of liability and additional coverage out there to the public beyond what you're even contemplating passing today. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'll close the public hearing portion for this item on the agenda, and will now open for deliberation to the commission, consideration on what the rules should be regarding uninsured motorist limits, as well as rating requirement limits, and possible reconsideration of the liability insurance limits. I don't get to vote on this particular item since I'm acting as chair, but I do have some opinions on the matter, and so I'd like to voice those to the fellow commissioners. I believe that our previous ruling with regard to liability insurance limits and the AM best rating minimum of B+ was a proper ruling, and do not believe we need to readdress that rule, with the exception of maybe the date requirement of when it goes into effect. As far as uninsured and underinsured motorist limitation coverage, minimum requirements rather, I would think that we should require equal insurance minimums to liability insurance minimums, and stagger those requirements like we have for the new liability insurance limits.
What would be the starting point for uninsured motorists then, coverage?
The new requirement would be, well, there is no requirement right now, but
Right.
the new requirement would be 50, 150. And then a year later, it would go up to 100, 350.
I agree.
I understand that is a, will cause insurance rates to increase for taxi cabs, but I believe that is a very important consideration to take into account. However, I believe that the safety to passengers in Nashville who use taxi cabs should come paramount to that. So despite the fact that it will cost more money, I believe that the higher limits should be required.
I agree. Last month, we didn't have this legend in front of us, and that's what we wanted to refer to in order to consider a change. And having looked at it, I don't think that we should change what we originally had passed. So what are you thinking?
I agree with Mr. Hernandez, I guess I'm confused on where we do the stagger point. If we had initial coverage beginning on May 31st of this year, I can't recall did we have another date set for the increase in coverage?
Next year would have been, on May 31, 2014, it would go up again.
Okay, and we did not set a level at either point, so we would need to do that at some point also, if the commission agrees to. I recall somebody telling us, or somebody was speaking to us, that levels would take a bigger bite, and maybe we should have a 25 or 50,000 amount before we go and raise it this year, so it gets the insurance companies prepared for it. I'm just not sure at what level to set. I'd like to hear from fellow commissioners regarding your thoughts on coverage.
Well, I believe right now the minimum liability insurance requirement is 25, 50, 25. And so that would be going up under the existing rule right now at the end of the month to 5,150. And presently there is no uninsured motorist requirement.
And next year it is 100, 300, 150, is that correct?
No, 100, 350.
50, sorry.
I think Mr. Fields had something he wanted to add.
I think currently, and again, there's a lot of insurance people, are they correct? I think the state minimum now is 25, 50, 15, correct?
15.
On current liability. That's what the commission required prior to your previous actions. I think one of the issues, if I may have permission, is the issue of the cost that would be added with the uninsured motorists. I don't think there's any question that we want to make sure that the public is protected, but I think there is an issue of the cost. And our role in public safety also had public welfare as well, and what I would not want to have happen, if possible, is to injure the industry from the standpoint of requiring more than is they can at this point. I don't know what an additional the uninsured motorists would be in terms of how much percentage it would go up. I don't know if it's a 15% bite or 20%. Again, there's insurers out here that do it every day. They probably could answer that kind of question. But our primary goal has to be public safety. That's before anything else, that's your primary role.
And with that being said, I guess uninsured motorist coverage is conducive to public safety.
Absolutely.
So what would be a realistic enactment date or compliance date? June 30th now?
I think probably longer than that, mostly because I think many of them began the process of getting the coverage. Some already had the coverage in place. Others basically said, if it changes, I'm going to have to do my work all over again. So they've held up. So again, I'm thinking probably closer to 60 or 90 days from today's date to make sure that we don't have to revisit this, because the worst thing that can happen is to set a date and have to come back and visit because they couldn't get the insurance in place. Again, I look back at the insurers who worked, but something on the order of August 30th or August 31st or September 1st, something along those lines. I don't want to put it off any further than we have to. The quicker the better, but we want to be realistic.
What if we give some consideration to staggering this, say 60 days to get in compliance with the 5,150, and then the uninsured, say 6 months from then?
I believe that's fair.
I think that, I don't know if that kind of compromises between public safety and public welfare, but that way the bite's not all at one time.
And as Mr. Fields stated, we have to be realistic. We can't expect everybody to change their underwriting practices overnight. I mean, it's going to take some time for the insurance companies also.
And I would agree that B plus is fine. I appreciate everything that was brought to us today, but I've looked at this. B plus stays on the secure rating, and there's no difference between B plus plus and B plus in terms of the rating by AM Best. It's still good. So if we're staying secured and with a minimum of good, I'm in favor of what Mr. Hernandez said before, that I don't see much that needs to change, including the minimums we're talking about for insurance I would suggest, though, that we maybe say August 31st or September 1st for the first part to go into compliance, and then the, say, 6 months from then, whatever that comes out to, for the uninsured motorists, since that's a new bite at the apple, or a new requirement completely.
And when you say new part, are you speaking about the 50/100, 50/150 or the 130/50?
No, for the minimum, we were talking about 50/150, starting with that.
And
And then bumping up to 100.
And then a year from then.
a year from now?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I
then
agree with
in
that.
between there, 6 months in between there for the uninsured motorists to get in compliance with that minimum.
I believe that sounds fair. I believe that would give insurance companies enough time to get ready for it, start their underwriting practices, and
Maybe ease the cost on the taxi companies.
right.
Do you want to make a motion?
I can take a stab at it. All right, I would make, are we, oh, I'll wait till, are we done with discussion or deliberation?
Yeah, certainly we can entertain a motion.
Okay. I'd make a motion that by September 1st, the minimum insurance of 50/150 be in compliance, or be a requirement. That 6 months from that date, which be what, March 1st? March 1st, that there be uninsured motorists or minimums of 25, 50, 15. 1 year, or on September 1st, 2014, that the insurance coverage go to 100, 300, and 150. Is that right? Okay. And that the company have a B+ rating or above. I think that covers everything.
Are you, I just have a question. Are you increasing the uninsured motorist coverage on March 1st, 2015?
I was thinking that I might just let that sit, and we could deliberate, we could take that up next year if we wanted to look at raising it.
And what was your set point for the UM coverage? I missed that.
25, 50, 15, which is, I understand, is the minimum at this time.
March 1st, 14.
Yeah.
I second.
Motion is second. All those in favor of the motion,
Aye.
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Good job.
God help us.
Great job.
He said, God help us.
Do my best. Metro Legal's been training me.
Next, we have a public hearing on the consideration of a program to allow existing holders of taxi cab certificates of convenience and necessity to place into service as many as 10% new vehicles which are ADA accessible taxi cabs, and whether or not to consider holding a special meeting to consider such applications. A couple of people have requested to speak. Excuse me, one person, Mr. Thornton.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Dick Thornton. I represent Taxi USA. Is Mr. Fields going to make a presentation? Because if he is, I'd prefer to wait, and I could supplement and not restate things that he's going to cover. If he's not, then I'll say a word, and then I'll
Sure.
sit down.
Mr. Fields?
If I may, I'll set historic precedent, or parameters. In 2002, we began meeting, the Transportation Licensing Commission staff began meeting with various interest groups related to accessible transportation, primarily led by the Center for Independent Living. During that time, various metro agencies participated in conversations. We determined, even that far back, that we had a need for accessible taxi cabs in Nashville. At the time, we had 2. Since then, there's been one program that was a 2-year trial that put together that allowed additional taxi cabs that were ADA accessible to come onto the streets. It was a volunteer program. And that's always been the issue, should it be voluntary or mandatory? It strikes me that the industry is growing, and it right now is anticipating a lot of new growth because of the prosperity we're experiencing in Nashville. And my proposal to the commission to meet the need that I think continues to be, and I think there are people here today and some letters that that have of support that would indicate we need additional ADA taxi cabs. At the present time, we have 36 that are licensed as ADA cabs. My proposal would be to allow each company that to be licensed as many as 10% of their fleet. For instance, if they had 100 cabs, we would allow them to put on another 10. If they had 35, they'd be allowed to put on 40. This would, in essence, if everyone participated in this would, in essence, this would actually allow for a total of 80 ADA cabs to come on in Nashville. Now, the one thing I would want to make sure we're careful of is there have been some companies who have aggressively gone after ADA, and I would not want to penalize them in terms of not allowing them to take the ones that they have now and put them on the ADA side. For instance, if they had 100 and they already had 4, we would take those 4 and we would put it against their 10, and they could put on an additional 6, and then allowed to have regular taxis on the other. What that's going to do is not necessarily reward, but it would allow them not to certainly hurt their current structure as you've approved it, because they've done the ADA because they felt the need and they saw opportunities, I suspect. So my hope is that you would consider a program that would be a permanent program that would follow the companies, that they could always have as much as 10% above whatever's approved by the commission, and allow them to only operate that on, as I would call it, the ADA side. Those would not be counted against them in terms of their allotment, nor would they be counted toward their allotments at the airport, although the airport makes those decisions. It would be simply allowing them the opportunity to provide a service that I believe is very needed, and I think there will be people today that will tell you that. So that's what I like.
And I believe ADA taxi cabs are being utilized by MTA in their Access Ride program also.
They provide services that the current Access Ride cannot provide for whatever reason. Overflow is provided by taxi cabs, and my understanding is there's additional need. I think I shared a letter we'll put into the record today from MTA supporting this program.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. Mr. Thornton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, we support the recommendation. We applaud Mr. Fields' initiative in bringing it, and we did speak separately and appreciate his clarification with regard to the credit with the vehicles that are on the street now, because we have 18 ADA cabs on the street right now. There is some demand in the market, but as you know, the cabs are very expensive relative to an ordinary cab, and so I think it's appropriate to provide a bit of an incentive, as described by Mr. Fields, for the companies to put as many of the ADA accessible cabs on the street as possible. So we support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you.
How many licenses would that be adding to Nashville's existing?
In essence, about 44, if you recount the 36 that exist today. Although we did pull one off this week because it ended up being out of compliance, so it's probably 35.
Mr. Fields, I have a question. When you were giving your numbers, you had mentioned 80 ADA cabs?
Yeah, 80, what it would amount to, if you were to take the allotment that you have now for 755 and go company by company, if you factor in the ones that have 25, for instance, we have one with 25, we can't give them 2.5, so I'd recommend that we roll it up to So instead of 75 and a half cabs, it would actually total out to be 80.
Okay.
If everyone participated. I don't anticipate all the companies participating, at least not up to the highest level.
That's 80 new ones, or is that in combination?
It would basically be another 40, assuming everything happened, it'd be another 44 or 45, depending on how many's in service today.
Are there any other persons that would like to speak on this issue? If you could please introduce yourself.
I'm Doug Trimble with Yellow Cab Metro. We support this and commend Mr. Fields' office for this move. We'll do our best to get them on. I think we have some owners that'd be very interested in doing this. Most of the ADA that's already in the streets of Nashville are used for direct billing accounts. This would create a lot more freed up ADA vans for the general public calling in on the spur of the moment. And we wholeheartedly support this. So, thank you.
Thank you. I believe there was someone else in the audience.
Good afternoon. I'm Jerry Hall. I'm the ADA manager for Metro Government. I'm also a technical advisor to the Mayor's Advisory Committee for People with Disabilities. And I believe Mr. Fields is giving you a letter from the chair of that committee in your packets. We had a meeting about 2 weeks ago where we discussed some of these incentives that were being proposed. I can tell you that the committee is 100% behind this proposal. Right now, we do know that the cabs provide for overflow for access ride. With the new Music City Center opening, with other businesses opening because of that, we see a huge influx of people from out of town visiting our city, and we want to make sure that there's always accessible cabs available for that need. So I just wanted to say that the committee is 100% behind this, and I want to thank Mr. Fields for all his work on this. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'll close the public hearing. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, sir.
My name is Tom Hopton. I'm with the Center for Independent Living of Middle Tennessee, and Mr. Fields and I have worked on this project for quite a few years. And it's a great opportunity for Nashville to have the accessible cabs. And just to give you an example, I was actually, before this meeting, I was at the airport's accessibility committee meeting, and this issue came up, and they don't think there can be enough accessible cabs. Also, the opportunity is, we did some research a while back on a project with MTA regarding medical visits. Between Vanderbilt and Centennial Medical Center, they had made 70 visits in one day. So you can see where there's a huge need for accessible vehicles in Nashville. And appreciate your consideration on this, and any information that you need or anything that we can do to support this, we really would appreciate it. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
How do we get the word out to people outside of Nashville that consider visiting towns that we have ADA cabs available?
That is a challenge. And we present Nashville as an accessible community, and we've actually had conferences come here. We let everybody know from our agency. We're Center for Independent Living, just to back up a little bit, is a federally funded program to assist folks in their participation in the community. There's 400 of them across the country, so we have counterparts everywhere. And I get calls quite often about, how do you get accessible cabs? How did you get it in Nashville? And I mean, it's a long road to do this, but these are some of the things that we did, working with the Taxi Licensing Commission and, just educating the community on this. And the mayor's big on accessibility, and we're all the time talking about it. So, and we're doing everything we can. I know Convention and Visitors Bureau has been a big help in getting the word out about the accessibility of Nashville. So, but anything that we can do, we're doing it. And we get calls about even the hotels. We do research to make sure hotels are accessible. Somebody's looking for a convention here or something, we'll go take a look at the place to make sure that, it's fully accessible, because we do have some places that, there's some variables in there, and a lot of folks don't have good information when they're renovating and things. So, but we'll go look at them and do what we can. Kind of the unique feature we have here is MTA and the compliance division take a look at the vehicles to make sure that they are accessible. It's not, and there's some guidelines that are, this is the slope of the ramp and all those kinds of things, or the lift. Make a van an accessible van as opposed to just, it may be. I don't know. Some are and some aren't.
Sir, as a convention provider here in Nashville, personally, my company, we work with a lot of ADA vehicles, and we have found that there are some, and I'm not opposed to this, and I'd like to see it happen. What we're finding a challenge with is the drivers not being able to operate the lifts. And I'd like to hear how you might be addressing that issue.
Well, actually, and that's something that we can look at. There's some training available on lift operations and stuff. One of the things that I guess is that helps with that quite a bit is a lot of the vans are ramped, have a wheelchair ramp instead of a lift on them, and maybe a little more costly, but at the end of the day, the operation of it's less of a challenge. But there is training. MTA does some training for their drivers, and that might be an opportunity to assist the cab companies and making sure that they're operating the lifts properly, because that is a big issue. That's something that concerns us.
issue,
Yeah,
yes.
it concerns us. And that might be the opportunity we look at. Right now, we do the training for the cab drivers on disability sensitivity, but we don't do it on operating the equipment and stuff. So that might be some things that we can look at. We'd be happy to provide any information that we have on that. I don't know if a videotape would be quite enough, but some folks, I think the training's probably a couple hours for lift operation and maintenance and stuff. And a lot of it's a maintenance issue.
You would think that if I bought a cab and I had a driver, that I would want the driver to be able to operate the cab
and do it properly,
and do it
because there's some
properly and
challenges there if you don't. So you had the insurance folks talking a little while ago. It could be an insurance issue. So, but yeah, if we need to find some information on training or how we can do that, we can do that. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The issue of sharing this information, I have to have Terry Clements from the Convention and Visitors Bureau might be able to shed some light on how we might share this around the country in terms that Nashville is more accessible.
I'm Terry Clements with the Convention and Visitors Bureau. You've heard almost unanimous support here today for this. We are wholeheartedly behind it. I'm not going to mention the convention center because I think everybody knows about it pretty well. There's 9 hotels under construction right now that many people aren't aware of. So we're going to see another 3,000 plus rooms come online in the next 18 months. We're getting more and more people who need this service. Difficult to get a cab late at night if you're in a wheelchair. And so our website right now gets over 1 million unique visitors. We operate 2 visitor centers. We're going to do everything we can to get the word out. We're in the process right now of mainstreaming onto our website accessible need information so that you don't have to click through. It's just right there in front of you. So we'll do everything we can to spread this word. And we think as we offer more services, we're going to get a lot more people who are going to want to come here because we do offer those services.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have also found that those people who need wheelchair accessibility, they know where to find it. They know the questions to ask and who to call. So, and we're happy to be able to provide it in this city. So
And if I may,
I'm a supporter.
I apologize. MTA's board meeting is going on exactly at the same time as your board meeting is going on now. They sent a letter that says the MTA supports the addition of accessible cabs in Nashville-Davidson County. The accessible cabs are paramount to Nashville being considered a diverse city, providing options for people with disabilities to live independently. This is also a must considering the anticipated increase in tourism with the opening of the center. The more accessibility options there are in Nashville, more people with disabilities will have timely options to their transportation needs. And this is from the general manager, Don Disler of MTA. And they apologize for not being able to be here, but they were needed at that meeting.
Is there anyone on the commission who is opposed to this? I think you're preaching to the choir here.
I believe we have one other person, unless they do.
I'm going back to the
Would you like to explain the steps they need to take at this point?
I think a motion that adopts Mr. Fields' recommendation. As I understand it, he is talking about allowing, well, okay, under our code provisions for approving additional taxi cab permits. There's kind of a 2-step finding that we've talked about before. We talked about at the annual meeting. And this would be, basically, we would be approving additional taxi cab permits. So this would be a specially called meeting. And I don't mean today, because the specially called meeting, the code provisions actually specifically provide that you hold that meeting for the purpose of reviewing applications. And of course, we don't have any applications for these additional permits before us yet. So basically what we would be doing is providing for the June hearing to be a specially called meeting to determine whether to approve certain additional taxi cab permits above and beyond the number that's already approved, that you approved at the annual meeting previously. And the other aspect of that you may be able to do is to kind of limit the types of permit applications that you're willing to consider at that meeting to be consistent with Mr. Fields' proposal or recommendation that we only consider an amount up to 110% rounded up of the existing fleet, and that like basically each certificate holder would be able to apply for an additional 10% number, assuming that they are willing to commit in their applications for those additional permits that a total number of their final fleet number will be 10% accessible.
Would be no more than 10%.
So their total number of permits can be 110% of what they have now, so long as 10% of that is accessible. Did I say that right?
Yes.
And so you're basically setting some limits on it. Now, one of the kind of threshold findings that you all are supposed to make before you issue additional taxi cab permits is that it is supported by the public convenience and necessity. So I think the evidence that you've heard here today would enable you to make to go ahead and make that finding today if you find that the evidence supports it. And then, you know, on that basis, you could proceed to say, in June, we will consider applications for that additional 10% amount up to a total of 80, as Billy explained. So,
Am I allowed to say so moved?
You've been taking copious notes. Are you ready to make a motion?
Sure. All right, I'll make a motion. Based on the statements made today and the general consideration of the public convenience and welfare, I would move that the June hearing, that we take up the consideration of applications, special applications for taxi cab permits in compliance with ADA, and that it be limited to only 10% over the previous number that's been approved for each taxi cab company. In essence, then there would be 110% of the number previously approved.
I second.
Motion has been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Fields. I believe the next item on the agenda, we have some renewing record driver permit requests.
We have three renewing record driver permits: Vince R. Connor, Darrell Golden, and Elvis W. Hunt. Their applications are in order and do not require appearance before the commission. I would ask approval.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve Mr. Connors, Mr. Golan, and Mr. Hunt's applications.
I second.
Motion seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item is new record driver permit requests. Mr. Fields?
Staff has reviewed these names, or these applications: Aaron Bagley, Jerome Cotton, Wesley Ford, Tony D. Gooch, Dolph Johnson, Alexander M. McCorkle, Robert L. Morris, David L. Muma, Julio C. Rodriguez, Dwayne E. Walker. All their applications are in order, and they meet the criteria for approval.
Is there a motion regarding the permits requests?
I would move that we approve en banc the names previously mentioned or referenced by Mr. Fields.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we have a request for non-consent towing permit from American Locators and Recovery Service.
American Locator and Recovery Services requested a permission to be a non-consent towing company. By your rule, they have to be in business for more than a year. They have been in business more than a year. They do meet the criteria. There have been, over the history of their company, limited problems that have been identified to the commission. Ms. Crocker, I think, are here, and Mr. Crocker's here for sure. He'd be happy to address any questions, but staff says they meet the criteria for approval.
Commissioners?
Your turn.
I make a motion that we approve the application for non-consent towing for American Locators and Recovery, Inc.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is an announcement regarding a transfer of emergency record zone and a request that we have a public meeting for next month's on next month's agenda?
One of the companies, Dad's Towing, has entered into, or has begun entering into an agreement with United Road Service to purchase West Nashville, the West Nashville Towing Company. The zone does not go with the company, so he can purchase the company because he can't purchase the zone. In order to operate the zone, he has to ask for a transfer, which he's made application. That transfer has to be 30 days, has to be done at least 30 days prior to a meeting. Any other company can also apply to operate that zone, and which again will have to meet that same criteria. So this is just a formal announcement that they have entered into an agreement. They're both here and could address that if you like. We do have a unique situation because under normal circumstances, you would have your annual record zone assignment meeting in June. So it would be an interesting, again, we've spoken with legal some trying to figure out how's the best way to approach it, because you would basically have a request for a zone transfer at the same, during the same meeting. You'd also have the annual assignment, and those that have been through the annual assignments know that's always an interesting meeting. So we will work that out, but this announcement had to be made regardless of how we actually present it to you from that meets the legal criteria. We have to announce it so anybody could make the application for the transfer.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. Thank you, Mr. Fields. Mr. Williams, I see you requested to speak. Do you want to speak now, or would you like? I'm sorry.
I just want to hear his announcement. I might want to speak on it later, but not today.
All right.
So it does not require commission action at this point. It's strictly, this is the public announcement. There will be a public advertisement as well that will notice potentially both issues, unless they end up being, since they coincide, it's possible they don't have to be done separately. They may have to be done again. We'll be working with legal to make sure we actually do it correctly.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is other passenger for hire.
No business.
No business. Is there any other business? That concludes our agenda for today. Commissioners, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good day.